Доброго вечора всім. Ми раді вітати вас сьогодні у Urban Space 100 на презентації Urban Transformation від Британських бюро Zero and студії Львів, що проходить в рамках програми Urban, що реалізується Британською радою в Україні, Goethe-Інститутом та освітньою платформою CANactions. І зараз
It's not on. Hello. Thank you for inviting me. I will be talking in English. It's my second language as well, so I don't feel so bad not able to speak in Ukrainian, that is your language. My name is Jay. I'm from London. I'm originally from South Korea, and today has been quite an interesting day today for me. Well, I'm no longer South Korean, but the president just got impeached, so we have hope. It might happen in America too, you never know. Anyway, so I will go through our project very quickly. We've been operating for past about 10 years in predominantly in public spaces and public projects. And I'm not going to go through the details of the project, but give you the flavor of the themes that we've been working on quite specifically to the public realm. So past 10 years, we've been grew from the art installation and public spaces organization to delivering quite a now bigger scale architectural projects. Our team has grew and we came together with a 00, and we're not entirely sure how many of us are entirely in ecosystem, but Studio Weave, I know we're 12 of us. So some small project that we do, we have designed a range of salts for the Hoxton monster supply. This is quite a long story. We designed this range of salts that is harvested from human tears, and when monsters eat them, they can feel human emotions. Monsters don't really feel emotions very much, so they need some help from the human salts. Listening devices dotted around the country, listening devices in exhibitions, public furnitures, we've done quite a lot of design too, and slightly larger scale. We converted a canal boat into a cinema, we converted a bus into the mobile workshop, we do standalone installation, which I will talk about slightly more later. Again, public spaces in City of London. I will talk a little more about this as well. Lullaby Factory for a hospital, the working with the children and composer for the music. A community building we delivered in southeast of England. The artist studio up in Scotland. So these are small buildings now becoming more formed. This was our first building, including windows and locks and so forth. Installation inside, working with our architects, very long bench that is only about 360 odd meters long. Slightly larger projects that, oh, should I speak it louder? Sorry. Slightly larger project, we're currently delivering this a school building in west of London. We've got the planning and this is just about to go on site. Learning center for the intellectually challenged people in Kent, in England. Some proposals that we have made, working with different types of clients. Conversion of a 19th century, this was the 1884 building in southeast of England. And some now quite a large stuff. This was a habitat sanctuary in Essex, and again in England. We worked a variety of the master planning and high street regeneration project for the various local municipalities. We hardly do competitions, but this was on the poster, so I thought I should put it in. This is in Denmark that we've got the prize for, subterranean Hans Andersen Museum and the Storytelling Center, and some large project, our current project, we're working in, this is social housing, we're working in London at the moment. So a lot of our early projects were providing art installation in public realm, and we started really thinking about what it actually means. It's a small-scale interventions, very quick and a temporary, and how these things comes about. This is about splash. How do you make a big impact very quickly, as resourcefully as possible? This is when we turned Somerset House, I think this was 2008, maybe, into London's largest living room. So we carpeted it, we put furniture in it, we collaborated with the fabric designers to make this whole thing together. This was there for 2 weeks and then dispersed everywhere in London to have a public seatings and public lighting. Listening devices, as I mentioned, dotted about in the Midlands and in Derbyshire. I think they're still moving about. It's owned by National Trust, who manages lots of landscape in there. So this device is listening to the sky, so wind and birds and things. We do a lot of silly stuff. And Smith, this was in collaboration with the manufacturer of concrete panels, that I'm now there on the special advisory board for the product development or something, that we actually drawn the narrative of how much of making actually happened in this part of London called Clerkenwell, which is completely lost now. They just sell furnitures and a lot of consultants, architects and things there, which is kind of a sad story. Lullaby Factory, this is kind of in a crevice of 2 buildings, one new and one very old. We reimagined how do you present. This project is actually really complex. I can go into so much details how we worked with this client. They had so much problems that the architecture, the new architecture has been delivered is not doing. The building that you see here, the brick building, is not meant to be there, according to the new building they have delivered. That glass building on the right is designed to overlook this beautiful open space. And all the wards and all the patients are right up against that glass facade. But what they didn't quite think about is this building, which will be demolished. It'll be demolished in 20 years, 15, 20 years' time. And the building life of the new building is 25 years. So that's a pretty big misjudgment at some point they have made. So they asked, this was a competition, we were invited to participate. So a lot of this attachment, rather than covering it up, we decided to give the new meaning to it. So all these pipes and connections that no one really knows what is going on. They told us do not touch them. We don't know why they are there, but they are there for a reason. So we reappropriated it, give the new reasons, working with the children's and storytellers at the hospital. This is a children's hospital, so children can reimagine what this space could be. Yeah, a lot of fun little elements happened. And then now we're starting doing slightly larger end of the project, very gold and very fancy. The high-end space development to host other artists' work. So this is Cabinet of Curiosity is nothing new about the concept itself. It's changing every 4 to 6 months. Now at the moment that space is filled with paper birds, and there's a sound and audio system is the birds, tweeting and so forth. So these kind of art projects in public realm, it can be seen as quite ostentatious and waste of money. And sometimes it is true, but often it can generate a lot of different conversations and how do you actually bring the project together. We're trying to use these projects to extend the narrative of a place rather than plonking something on the top that is going against the grain. But there are different practices that it can be worked. Palace upon pillar. This is this used to be in easternmost end of City of London, commemorating the gate once due there. But we reimagined the Chaucer. Chaucer is great grandfather of English language. That he lived there as a custom official. So we actually reincarnated one of his the poem, how he imagined this this palace standing on impossibly thin pillar. Lots of making, unusual setting in London. And then we started working directly with the local artists. We started getting slightly larger commission. So we've been starting to curating who's been doing the artist commission. So this is in the south part of London. We worked with about 28 different artists, commissioning them to paint and revitalize the areas has been neglected, working with the shop owners, giving different brand identity. What we designed is just a framework for artists to work with the others. And infrastructure in public realm. It's not traditional infrastructure, but it's what gives the public life. This is Narrowway, very close to our office. I'm quite proud of this project because it was completely the bus-filled, horrible street, but somehow we managed to gather the support to temporarily close this street for 3 months only, just to test the idea, whether it can be pedestrianized. And this happened now 3 years ago in the summer. And what we did is, again, this is a splash. We had hardly any budget, so we just painted a ground very bright color, and we invited the local group of people to do the plant workshop, making furniture workshop. So asked them to occupy this space so they can actually use it and sit down and enjoy. And that project is now permanently pedestrianized. They are doing all sort of work in there. And sometimes it's quite just light touch, the furniture making. This is Barbican Estates in a city of London. We have designed a series of furnitures just to go with providing the seats. They had a lot of problems there that people are not quite feel invited in the high street itself. But this had quite a sad ending, which I'm not going to go into today. And this project that we worked with the City of London, the site has been empty since the Great Fire, which is 1666, so more than 300 years. And City of London land value is astronomical, but this site has been empty all the time because it's graveyard. No one can touch it, no one can build on it, it's a protected ground. So we kind of placed the lid on the top. We reimagined Romanesque church and how you can work with local carvers. So this is a school in City of London, a City and Guilds, the carving company, that we've been working with their historic carving students to make these the elements to come alive. We value working with the local craft people a lot. We think as a designer, what we can do is enable local people to refocus and provide what they are very, very good at. It's not about us saying this should be exactly looking like this, feel like this, but it's always a collaborative process going through some step by step. And then we're starting to doing slightly larger project because we've been doing a lot of the small pocket projects. It kind of grew into more infrastructure providing, working with the civil engineers. Sometimes it's very simple, the paving, but it's analytically looking at which spaces is gathering areas. And architecture in public realm. Small buildings can have a big impact. This is a neglected corner of the Dartford in East London. They asked us to just provide some bench to resolve antisocial behavior. People were doing drugs, rough sleeping, all sort of things going on. And we're like, that doesn't give the ownership of space to anyone to actually tackle this kind of issue. So we had a lot of conversation with the local groups, and what they actually wanted is a place they can hold events and conversations. They can run their own workshop. So this project was made the working with a local group of fabric makers and knitters who can grow their the plants for the dyeing process itself. So this building is entirely hand painted, and there was about 2 weeks workshop with over 150 people turning up throughout the period of process to paint this entire building to a pattern. It's very well used now. This is kind of workshop that happens there every warm weekends. And now there is, I think, about 8 or 9 different local groups, and 6 different schools have keys in rotation using these facilities. And we have refurbished a 19th century building, curating the contents and how they should do the outreach to the community as an organization, and what this the public asset means to them. Curate, create, and inhabit. We had a long conversation with a client who haven't really had the experience of the community outreach, how they can curate this space together every year, slightly different mode, combining their skills and assets and organize this space together. I'm not going to go into too much detail about it. Lots of games, a lot of touchables. The curation itself was quite hard because we knew nothing about this building, and there is hardly any record, and who it, I mean, we only knew who built it. We didn't know about his life either. So a lot of this exhibitions is quite a fabrication and imagination, which can be changed each year. A lot of contents were made in collaboration with the local group of people. So, for example, there were a series of furniture workshop with a local group of kids and families to make all the furnitures inside. It was quite hard to balance because you're making public furniture, need to be robust. So the carpenters working quite close with them, and the illustration and the coffee making, the dressmaking. All of these parts, the contents of the exhibition were made in consultation and a workshop with the local residents. Another project we continuously doing, we've been involved in this project in Ireland for past 4 years. Very narrow streets, very dangerous, cars going past. Group of people wanted to think about pedestrianizing this space, and year by year, by having public events on those streets, we are getting closer and closer. So the parties on the street, this was a week closure, and furniture making, and that became a 3 weeks closure. And a couple of years ago, we managed to get quite a larger funding to hold entire the theatre production on the street, repainted all the facades again. They were quite run down, and we managed to work with the theatre companies for 2 months closure of this road. And now they are seriously having conversation about completely turning this into pedestrianization in their town. So these are very flattened, the 3 quite large elements that we consider: architecture and landscape, which is quite a physical element that we deliver, and there is civil engineering, that the technical delivery that we are working with the other engineers that comes with a quite large budget, and cultural, the arts and the heritage projects. All of these are not happening in isolation. We would like to put them together to create the same outcome. Sometimes it's working with maintenance. Just simply finding out your local council has a large budget to repaint buildings, social housing, and you work with them to find what color would be appropriate and how you consult your residents. So this was a whole project about writing design guide, how to go through this process together, and how about the signage when they come up, the replacement, the signage, how they should be looking like and feel like, and where they should be. So this is huge volumes of the research and the design guides that we have produced for Hackney, and the framework. A lot of London is going through the development at the moment, and a lot of development sites are vacant for quite a long time. And how to utilize those kind of areas. This is a study that we've done with a 00 in East London, identifying the already vacant plots, finding what kind of a project is possible, just finding out, scoping out the possibilities. Not that we are saying that's the right thing to do, but if someone was going to propose certain kind of project, where would be the appropriate areas? So giving them idea of what they need. So giving them a lot of cues early on, so they can get the yes and the delivery a lot quicker. And the developments. Now this is quite a bit of strands of our work. This is a Croydon master plan that we have worked with, identifying, there is a thing called Section 106 in Britain. When you do a big development, developers pay community contribution, and often that turns into the refurbishing community centres or towards a school or public realm. So we have identified areas in the high streets when the council themselves didn't really have money to progress, how that areas can be developed. And the consultation and conversation is very important. It's quite interesting that I was looking at Sasha's the story book in there about this place, that we've done very similar exercise in Croydon. We actually wrote a story, a narrative to describe and have a conversation with the people how the future of their city and part of the city should be. And then this is a recent study we've done with the Hackney Council, looking at the development opportunities within the strip of land, rather than looking at quite traditionally where the traffics and the elements and movements are already. We're starting looking at the what place can do, the place that can host events, the place that people actually using it quite the rapid pass-through moments, or the places people change their mode of transition, like walking to cycling to public transport, and just identifying those movements actually gave us quite a good indication of where they should prioritize their early development. And looking at the capacity of the buildings itself, in UK, the planning development documents that are given by council is a lot of jargons. It doesn't make a lot of sense for the most of people. This is just showing the appropriate development amount that is already having pre-conversation throughout. And then looking at the public spaces, giving them the right precedence, how it should be incorporated over the long period of time. So that's what we've been doing for past about 10 years. The projects are quite far-reaching. And I think I'm going to pass on to my colleague, Joost.
Good evening, and like Jay already said, thank you for inviting us both here to speak and to be here. So I'm Joost. I work with a practice called 00. Jay and I work together a lot, and as you will see, that's not necessarily immediately obvious, because 00 is partially an architecture practice where my colleagues design stuff like this. And very clearly, it looks nothing like the stuff that Jay has just been showing. Style's completely different. My colleague, I'm not an architect, I can say this. My colleagues are austere minimalists, whereas Jay is obviously a joyful, colorful, he would kill me now, postmodernist, but there you go. Very different styles, but we love working together, and there's a reason for that, and I think that will become more obvious. So we're an architecture practice like Jay. We've existed for about 10 years. My colleagues run this. They design mostly workspaces. This is an industrial building, where people do. Well, we love to design the industrial spaces where Jay's makers, craftspeople can work from. And I guess for you here in Ivano-Frankivsk, that might be less obvious than it is in the UK. In the UK, a lot of industry has already left for a long time, and only recently we're now rediscovering the value of actually being able to produce things and to work together with craftspeople, with people who have the real skills to make products, whether furniture or pieces of art or metalworks, etc. And and we often design the buildings that they can work from. We started out doing temporary projects, very small scale public space projects, turning a car park into a public beach in the summer, and now we're onto buildings. But we also do quite different things. This, on the one hand, is our first office. Like many architecture practices, we started in someone's kitchen, the founder's kitchen. But after a while, we moved to a collective workspace called the Hub, and that's in central London. And it was around the year 2006 where co-working, which is now, of course, very widespread, wasn't so well known. It was a fairly new thing. But this was a space where lots of small businesses could work together in a beautiful old warehouse. And because we were working there, we were invited to create the next building by the owner. And so my colleagues refurbished this beautiful warehouse also in central London that became Hub King's Cross. And over time, this became a network. So this is a global network of startup spaces for social businesses. This is already out of date. There's now around 90 of these workspaces all over the world. And then we started to change, because we started as an architecture practice, but we were asked more and more often, how do you do this? Could you look at this building for us? Could you perhaps write a feasibility study for this other building? And then all of a sudden we decided, gosh, we should do this ourselves. We shouldn't just be the designers, but also the owners and managers and facilitators of these spaces, to make sure that this is not just an aesthetic thing, but also a social movement and a social platform that we can help to grow. So our work became less design and much more thinking about the management of these spaces, and how do you create a culture where people can be collaborative and can really benefit from being together in one space. Increasingly we started to run these spaces, and as we grew the number of spaces that we worked in, a lot of, most architects, as you know, are really frustrated furniture designers. So a lot of my architect colleagues decided to also design the furniture for these spaces. So this desk is a design that they made. But they were less interested just in selling that design than in thinking, how can this design be produced all over the world by local people? With their own production methods, and out of that grew another company called OpenDesk. And OpenDesk is a platform where designers anywhere in the world can meet fabricators anywhere in the world, and can meet the public who might want to buy these things. So if you're a young designer, say in Ivano-Frankivsk, and you have a furniture design in wood, then all of a sudden you can upload your design on this website, and it might be downloaded by someone in California who is fitting out a startup space. And all of a sudden you, as a young designer, can sell to the whole world. Right? And that became a project that went global very quickly, because there's a fundamental truth, right? That it's much easier to ship recipes than it is to ship cakes and biscuits. And that's what we can now do. in the changing economy and thanks to technology. So all of a sudden, we can democratize production. And this really happened, right? So people started to download these designs all over the world, and this is now an independent company. And it's beautiful that you see that, that in central Milan, an Italian furniture maker is tinkering with our designs and is adopting our stuff and improving our product, because it's an open source model where the design can be improved by other people. At the same time, we thought, can we perhaps apply that to bigger stuff, to homes? And this, of course, this is, I don't really have to explain how this works, but you know, the technology is now widely available, right? If you design a piece of kit, it can be cut all over the world, and then all of a sudden, a bunch of people working together can develop a home out of that, and that home can be put together like a kit of parts, just like IKEA, except unlike IKEA or any of these big companies. This is not for profit. This is open source. Anyone can work with it. So we started to create a project where people can download and print their own homes and put it together, just as a team of actually nearly amateurs, because it's so simple that actually it doesn't require screws. Anyone can participate. And again, this spread like a global movement. All of a sudden we have people in New Zealand improving our designs, coming up with new engineering solutions. And what that means is that where perhaps in the past you'd have one big building built by a developer, all of a sudden you might get in the future lots of homes designed by people, produced locally, etc. So instead of being purely dependent on financial capital, you also work with social capital, right? The citizens' own energy, passion, and drive. And this is not new, right? This is what used to happen in the past. People used to build their villages, their barns, their big agricultural sheds together. And the important thing is that this didn't just build a building, right? It also built a community, and it made a democratic local community. And we lost that. And in many ways, technology is enabling us to rediscover that. So we're working on a full system to create every step. So if the 20th century, by and large, was about increasing people's consumption abilities, now we feel that the 21st century is about democratization of production. And just to give you an example, even that Open Desk project has become something that can be used locally. This is a project that happened in Bristol, in a very poor neighborhood in Bristol, where there's lots of unemployment, lots of people not working. And there was a very large development there of a new office park, new office buildings, where the developer was going to spend a lot of money on furniture, right? Purchasing furniture. And we thought, hang on, if instead of buying furniture, we can convince them to buy a CNC machine, and we can work with local unemployed people to actually help them make the furniture. At the end of this project, local people have created a whole lot of stuff, and they have a piece of machinery that they can use to design their own furniture, to make their own things, and therefore live more cheaply with stuff that they've made themselves. And this happened, and all of a sudden, a new office is kitted out not by a company but by local people who got skills, work out of it, and a lot of self-confidence. So the potential, the dream, is that we can move from an economy that's corporate, purely corporate, led by very few people, to an economy that's truly civic, right? A democratic economy led by the many. And so what that means is we started out as an architecture practice, but we've moved beyond architecture, because places, good cities, good villages, good neighborhoods are about more than architecture. It's about people and how you build partnerships and how your design process and your products are participatory. It's about practices, using an open source ethos, being transparent in your governance, prototyping and testing things out. And architecture is just one of the platforms, together with public spaces and together with web technology. And so what we realized is, and this is something that architects often ignore, architects are obsessed with if you think about buildings and what they do for a city, architects are obsessed with the design process and the development process, but actually ultimately the real value lies in what buildings do over the 50 years or 100 years that they create. So architects often focus on the wrong thing, whereas we need to think about how buildings are used in the long run. And for example, one of the buildings that I showed earlier, an industrial building, all of a sudden, who thinks that an industrial building can be used for birthday parties, right? But the way we designed this building, we created a little open space in the center of this industrial workshop space, and all of a sudden the community starts to use it. People hire it for birthday parties, and all of a sudden you've created a piece of city rather than just a building. And this does so much more for the city than if we had purely focused on the design. So we've also grown our studio to reflect the fact that we're not just architects. We have a lot of different range of skills. And so space meets social innovation, right? And that's a very unusual combination. But we wrote a book about that, the Compendium for the Civic Economy. And we looked at lots of different examples of how citizens are now taking over cities in different ways. And of course, we're not the only ones doing that. There's lots of similar books. But this is what we were interested in. It was 2008, 2009. The economy in the UK had just crashed. There was no more big money, no more big private money, no more big public money. So what is the alternative, right? Small amounts of citizen time, energy, money, crowdfunding, and several ideas. And so the values of civic society and new ways of doing entrepreneurship all of a sudden came together. And it's real, right? This is not just a dream. There's loads of examples in that book of how these things work out. And I just want to highlight the one on the right. It's a project in Rotterdam called Granny's Finest, and it started when a young fashion designer went with his girlfriend to the old people's home where the girlfriend's grandmother was living, and she was on her own, and she was sitting in a corner knitting, right? Knitting a scarf. Knitting a beautiful, beautiful scarf with phenomenal skill, right? And the fashion designer thought, gosh, a lot of my friends, they can't knit like that lady, right? They don't know how to. They don't have the technique. They don't have the skills. And this lady is sitting here, and her skills are wasted because she was knitting for no one, right? So they decided to bring 5 young fashion designers together with 40 grandmothers to create fantastic high-quality scarves and jumpers and hats. And what that does, right? It doesn't just create new products. It also finds a way for an older generation with fantastic skills to be recognized and valued, and that means that these people are going to live a much happier life. They're not going to be as isolated as depressed. So this civic economy creates new stuff, new products, but it also creates new social value, and it changes the economy and society in a much bigger way. And I think that's something that has often escaped us, right? So I don't know if you guys know Monty Python, English comedians. They had a film called The Search for the Holy Grail. You're probably familiar with it. But people's participation has often been what people are looking for, right? We want citizens to participate in the development of our city, but it's not easy. Lots of citizens. We have democracy, we've got elections, but can people really create the city, or is it done by other people, by developers and by politicians? So I'm going to go over this quite quickly. But one of the problems is that we find it much easier to talk about nice individual stories, like a renewable energy cooperative here, rather than the really difficult, complex stuff, right? So this is a very abstract map of a very complex system about local governance. And what's happening, what I'm recognizing, is that all of us, urbanists, professionals, architects, business people, we love talking about startups, right? I love talking about Granny's Finest because it's such a beautiful idea and it's such a beautiful project. But actually what we really need to think about together is the complex systems that make this kind of entrepreneurship easier or more difficult. You know how in the 20th century we always used to talk about the state or the market. right? East versus West, capitalism, socialism, privatization, or the welfare state. Very simple stories about how the world was going to be. But it's not that easy. We've consistently ignored that actually, yes, you had the state, yes, you had the market, but actually you also have citizens. You also have citizens, and when coming together, they can create amazing things together. So let's not think about the future as just driven by startups, fantastic new young startups. It's also about what new types of citizen collectives can create and how you can bring people together in a non-commercial way. So I'm just going to give a few examples of how we're working on that. One project is actually something that we're doing with Jay. London, the city government of London is now actively asking citizens to take over public spaces, right? So they want small parks, road closures of the stuff that of the kind that Jay showed, to become part of what happens in London and to be what London becomes known for, because they recognize that city government doesn't have enough money. So we're currently working on an approach to make sure that everyone in London knows that actually they can take a few parking spaces and turn it into a park, that they can close off a road to make it into a space for festivals. And that's really interesting. So imagine, right? Imagine the city government of Ivano-Frankivsk basically asking citizens to take over public spaces and to turn it into something they want it to be, and working together in a really collaborative way with local government to make sure that happens in a way that doesn't ultimately completely stop traffic or create dangerous situations. We're also recognizing that if we want people to be in the driving seat of the economy, you need to work hard to help them do it. So a colleague of mine created this project called the Open Works. Basically a small shop, as you can see, full of examples globally of where people are really shaping their cities by themselves. And it basically asked a very simple question to anyone who would walk in. What would you like to do, and how can we help you to get started? So it had a very smart approach to making sure that if you had an idea, if you wanted to plant an orchard full of fruit trees, or if you wanted to close off a street, or if you wanted to create a new way for local craftspeople to show their products, that they would help you. They said, okay, right, we're going to help you make this happen in 4 weeks' time. We're going to help you make a website. We're going to help you sort out your insurance. We're going to help you create a logo, and we're going to connect you to lots of other people. So there's ways in which we can really make this practical, right? This idea of a city shaped by people is not just an abstract ideal. It's also a very particular series of processes that you can actually put in place. I'm not going to go to too much detail, but we thought about this long and hard. And then the beautiful thing is, people do take over spaces, right? Even people who you wouldn't expect to do that. Right? So you have so not just young, energetic architects do this, right? You also have older people taking part. You have unemployed people taking part. It's a democratic approach, not just something driven by people with laptops. And a whole series of projects. And the beautiful thing is, people understand that this is different, right? We interviewed people, and this is what they said, right? This is not like old school charity. This is a different approach. This is new. It's like creating your own little Silicon Valley, right? It's where all ideas come together, and all of a sudden stuff goes much quicker, and things are possible that you wouldn't dream of. And then lastly, I want to talk about a project in Birmingham. Birmingham is a very poor city in the north of England, post-industrial, lots of problems, and the city council has no money. But colleagues of mine started one of these workplaces here as well. This is what it looks like. It's very busy. But one of the things they used an old industrial building. cartoon on the right shows the story of what that building was originally used for. It was, the English Industrial Revolution, someone making very beautiful machinery there. That story is to be celebrated, but now it's about, they organized a TEDx event like you've done here, I now see, to create an enormous group of local people. And then they raised an enormous amount of money. Raising £65,000, not from wealthy people, but even from young people who might have only got £5 to spare, right? So equivalent of maybe $10. And they said, it's important for us to raise money from across a lot of people, because that means we're accountable to them, right? If you give us your money, that means we have to be transparent to you with what we do with that money. And it's a way of creating a new type of democracy, including in a business. So with them, we're trying to think, how can citizens reinvent City Hall, right? How can the many create new types of spaces that are legitimate, owned by everyone, that are financed on the basis of the outcomes they create? Like, do they make life better for older people? Do they make life better for young parents with children? And therefore you create a movement for change. So it's a new way of thinking of what public spaces really are. And I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly, but this is important. There's lots of money available globally and locally to invest in social good, right? In social outcomes. There's lots of big investors who want to do something good with their money. And there's lots of small projects out there that are struggling. And the two worlds never quite meet. And that's a real problem. So we're working very hard on ways to make sure that young initiatives, small businesses, have the right kind of business models to make sure that they actually can benefit from the money that's out there internationally. And this is the way in which it works in the UK increasingly. So UK government knows that certain social problems are incredibly expensive, right? A child who grows up in a broken family, who might have to be taken into care, costs the government lots of money, right? Hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of pounds, right? If you can do something to prevent that from happening, you can save government money. And on the basis of that saving, you can finance all sorts of new projects. And that's a way in which we're currently working. How can we create new, I mean, the details are not important, but how can we create new type of financial products to create the cities that we want to create using this type of innovation? And in that, we're inspired by people like Elinor Ostrom. You might know her. She was she's the first Nobel Prize winner for economics in 2009. And her research was exactly about what I said before. There's more to life than just government and the private market, right? Citizens do enormous amounts of things together, and that can create very strong and very resilient economies. And in the mid-20th century, we ignored that story. We were too obsessed with our ideological battles. But actually, this is the chance in the 21st century to create new type of institutions that bring out the best in human beings. The detail of this language doesn't matter, but she wrote a Nobel Prize speech, which is really worth looking at. And what we recognize is that in the 19th century in the UK, lots of new institutions were built. Universities, museums, public baths, right? So much happened in 1850, in 1890, etc. And then in the 20th century, there was just the state, and there was just the private market. And we have an opportunity now to create a very different kind of world, the world of Wikipedia, but then projected onto our cities. It's not about replacing the state. It's about how all these different layers can work together. So that's our journey, from architecture to managing workspaces, to now thinking about how we're going to create the fertile ground for citizens to adopt these kind of things in a much more far-reaching way. And in a very different way, Jay is doing very similar things. It might look different, but ultimately it's about creating new ways for citizens, for people like you and us, and all the other people out there that don't yet necessarily know that this is possible to basically enjoy their cities more. Whether it's by creating new types of street parties, or by building their own homes, or by finding jobs through new types of technology. That's ultimately what matters. What buildings look like, who cares, right? It's what they do, and it's what they make possible for the life of people in cities for the years and decades ahead. So I'd love to have to hear your questions about this. Hopefully you can have a bit of a discussion. I know that we talked for much too long. This was always going to be a risk. So thank you for listening, and hopefully we have a chance to talk. Thank you.
Maybe some questions? Ми дуже дякуємо. А також хотіла б сказати всім дякую за увагу і підписуйтесь на нашу сторінку CANactions і слідкуйте за нашими новими заходами. Цього року ми починаємо тур по містам України, тож тепер не лише в Києві. Дякуємо всім.